instead of for the people who were living the situation. So I wanted to come back to the discussion. I realized that a lot of people my generation was already fucked up because they had a lot of money, a lot of houses, everything, and they could not engage in the conversation. So I said, okay, I'll talk to the young people who have nothing to lose. And some of them are here today.
What was your pedagogic program?
My pedagogic program was based on contradiction because Cuba is a place with one voice. So I wanted to break that to go into a more civilian, civic society situation where people could discuss in very strong but very honest way without the fear that comes up with in Cuba.
And did you encounter problems?
We had few.
You had a few.
But as an artist, I prefer to focus on the...
Okay.
No, but we had few. But to be honest, I was with a lot of freedom. I was very surprised still today how much freedom. And I think the freedom was because I was covering a space that was not happening anywhere else. So they wanted that to keep going. I mean, I was invited, amazing international artists going to Cuba. I think a lot of young artists were, doing stuff,
And what was the output? Was it mostly conversations?
Yes.
So
every week we had, and I'm happy I closed this before having an art school became trendy. I was very excited about doing that. Like, I hate trends. So basically, what we did.
You mean?
Come on.
You withdrew.
No, I closed it, which is different.
Yeah, it is.
So basically, and I closed it when it became an institution into itself. People were recognizing to motion as an institution, and I think...
in which way? Was it invited abroad?
Well, we exhibit some of the work at the at the Oquis Quadro Biennale and also at the Liverpool Biennial. So
Well, is that possible? How to exhibit a school? Yeah, they try that in many occasions, but this very specific situation, it is an umbrella for being able to discuss and to meet. And in Guangzhou, you can meet.
Yeah, I think basically the strategy was different inside than outside. I think inside of Cuba, what is needed was something different what you need when you go to a biennial. So I think we were always very aware of the context of the work. And outside, what I did was promote the artists. Why? Because I think for them was also a way of protecting them, because their work was a little critical about the system, and it was a way to protect them the same way I've been protected by that. So, and also they have a bigger curriculum. Now they are, the government might be forced to recognize. They have to invite them, maybe because they were the only ones in Korea biennial. Maybe they have to invite them to the Havana biennial because that. I mean, it's kind of putting the institution in a situation of wondering if, So that's what I like to know.
So you stopped in time before it could become institutional or fashionable, and then now you opened just 2 days ago a very new project, a very big project that is again,
Yeah, well, Immigrant Movement International, check it out on the website. We have a website. Basically, it is not about conversation so much as actions. And basically, the project has two different aims. I'm always like bipolar or something because I always have two ideas, like artistic and political. Can never reconcile them very easily. So basically, while the first project was about arte de conducta, which is behavior art and how to use behavior as a tool to produce art, this one is about useful art. So it is trying to bring the discussion about, for me, and you can say whatever you want, but for me, useful art is the perfect bridge between two audiences, the informed audience and the uninformed audience in political art. Why? Because use is what society goes for. Like politicians are always like, oh, I'm doing the school because it is useful. They never say, I painted the street red because it's beautiful. They always try to play with how the benefit you provide to.
So you kind of like inserted yourself into that logic. The logic of like, it's a very pragmatic logic, we can have support when we convince the politicians that Of course, your
Well,
taxpayers can pay this because it is very useful for society.
right. But of course, you go to a show and it's ridiculous. This idea, but it's almost comical that people go to museum, they don't get it, blah blah blah. But if you go to an art piece where you get something that benefits you, you love that art, don't you? It's like great, I have this, and at the same time, hopefully, it will be something that for us, informed and experts or whatever you want to call it, will bring a level of discussion about what the role of art in society could be, you know? So that's why, I don't know.
Just one
I'm
thing
very
I want to
confused
come
about
to
this
you
useful
because
business.
I would assume, and before asking about a very specific experience, I would assume that you would never adhere to an idea of useful art.
Absolutely not. I mean, art by definition is purposefully useless, but I think
Oh my God.
no, but it is interesting because, in a way, you know, what you said, the politicians are happy because people go to exhibitions and say, we don't get it. Actually, isn't this not...
I didn't say this.
No?
No. What I say is like politicians usually, the way they work is by producing things in society that are useful for people or people benefit from, so they are popular.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And so isn't there something very useful in having things that nobody gets? Because if we don't have them,
Okay,
then we are only left with those things that everybody does get.
Okay, I'm with you. I think all art is useful, so I'm beginning on that. I think to contemplate something and not know what it is and go to places you never gone otherwise is important and it's useful. But I'm talking about useful for this specific concept in the implementation of art in society. How to produce an art that is not about signaling something, but about we can create a model that can be implemented temporarily to try it, and then other people can see it, actual politician who can really make it happen for long term, or other people can be inspired by that and do it. So it's not about
Isn't that just another way of saying instrumentalized?
I like implementation.
I think we
Might
deal
be-
here with
might
I
be-
think we are at two edges of cultural urgencies.
It's semantics. It's art.
No, it's not semantics.
No, it is. Art is not. Let's face it. Let's start. Take it as a proposition if you like, but it's an axiomatic one. Art is not useful. Art is purposefully useless. What you mean is art is purposefully. There is a purpose in its uselessness. I totally agree with that. But what use applies is that it can be used up through some form of consumption. That moment when we accept that art can kind of diminish through the process of its consumption, can be used up, at that moment, and I'm being that serious, we have no art anymore. And
Yes, but Tanya is
it's not a tragic moment, but we better start talking about something else, you know? And so...
But that's what Tanya also said before, that she would not care anymore if it is considered as art.
Yeah, I agree.
So in fact, when we come back to this discussion of the artist and the curator, your activities moves totally beyond that problem. You are organizing
Right now, I
something,
don't know what I'm
whether
doing
you're an
here.
artist or a curator or an educator or
Politician.
a politician,
Yeah.
etc. It has nothing to do with this kind of with the semantics we're talking about here, in a certain sense. It is beyond that. My question then was, and that was something I noted before, is why do you want, why do you want the feedback in the arts realm? Why don't you leave that behind?
I've been thinking a lot about that. Well, I think that is a handicap I have because I started studying art when I was 12, so I don't conceive any other, let's say, person to talk to. But I am very seriously thinking about it for the last 2 years. So,
Because then I would maybe move back to Pavel, because you were, after what you just said a second ago, you were co-curating with Charles Escher a very highly political exhibition, which was called What Happened to Social Democracy. How do you see this? Can you talk about this experience?
Yes.
How political it became, or how effective it was, or was it also just proposed uselessness? But why then was it called What Happened to Social Democracy?
I need to tread very carefully here. I'm pretty aware that words may kind of somehow, penetrate slowly or trickle down slowly to Charles, but I declare my undying love and commitment and loyalty to him. But the truth is that he doesn't have the sharpest of eyes. Let's say, let's put it that way.
Off the record?
Totally on the record, which is a beautiful. Or let me backpedal a bit. This was some years ago. Perhaps it wasn't as highly developed as it is now. Nevertheless, that's the beautiful thing about it. And so I think Charles brought me. It was his idea, born. I'm now being serious, out of experience, not always necessarily pleasant or positive, of living in the kind of Sweden at the time of decaying social democratic system, or sentiment rather, in that case. And the question for Charles, an Englishman of German descent living in Scotland really, was, what the hell is going on here in this sort of, in this sort of place of where there should still be at least a shred of possibility, or some kind of little bit more than the unthinking and kind of completely arbitrary sort of self-assurance. Yes, but we are kind of, social democratic, and that's how it is. And having asked that question, Charles felt, and to his very great credit, that he perhaps needed somebody, if you like, to put his foot into it, and that was really my job in it. I was brought into this project and very gratefully, enthusiastically accepted the role of the kind of ignorant guy who will say, but Charles is not very good painting, is it? It interested me because I really believe that art in its social destination, when it takes the form of the sort of publicly displayed work or an exhibition or whatever, is only as effective. Art is effective, it's not useful, but it can be effective, is only as effective as it is good as art. It is true that artists have and claim, and not without good reason, claim that kind of privilege given to them by the artistic license to provoke, to transgress, to do kinds of things that perhaps the rest of the humanity would be reprimanded for doing. Of course, the trade-off is that those things in the public domain are of very little effect, precisely because they are done sort of under that license. But the only thing that the artist can do effectively, that we can even have the remotest hope will do anything, is good art. You need a good art in the first place. Everything else you do is just sort of everything else.
So what, in your opinion, and I might share that with some of the others again, is the surplus of an artist curator doing a show towards our kind?
Well, two personal experiences from the last year. Last year I exhibited, I was kind of summoned and didn't withdraw. By two artists for two very different shows, very different purposes. The first one was an exhibition by John Bock, the title of the exhibition in German is so complex and so very long that I'm not even going to try and pronounce it, but it was something at the Temporary Kunsthalle in Berlin last summer.